Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Chris Dost. Welcome back to our series on the textual analysis of the Hebrew Bible and its Masorah. If you haven't subscribed already, please be sure to subscribe to this channel and encourage your friends to do so as well. I also encourage you to click the bell below so that you will be notified when I publish videos like this one in the future. And please be sure to share this video on social media so that we can get the word out about this series. All right, let's get started, everybody. Let's jump into Amos 1:4. The Hebrew reads, V'shilachti esh bevet Chazael ve'achla menot ben Hadad. Now more slowly. V'shilachti esh bevet Chazael ve'achla menot ben Hadad. V'shilachti esh bevet Chazael ve'achla menot ben Hadad. So we begin with Vav consecutive form, V'shilachti. This is a PL form with the expected vocalization. It is a first-person common singular suffix conjugation, but because of the Vav, I will send fire. I do not recommend translating the Vav as and. I would translate as so, simply because of the context, but it is really the context that should guide our translation of Vav. I will send esh, fire, bevet Chazael. We have the preposition ba, prefix to the singular, masculine singular construct noun, vet. The second beit does not receive a dagesh because it is preceded by a vowel, therefore it is bevet. So in the house of Chazael, ve'achla, and it will consume. This is the verb to eat, but eat can also mean consume. This is a third feminine singular, and it will consume. Now keep in mind that this is a masculine plural construct. Remember that there are certain words in Hebrew that will take what appears to be a plural ending, but it will really be masculine. And this is a masculine term, the citadels of Ben Hadad. Really, we have a three-word construct chain. Armenot is a construct, Ben is a construct, and Hadad would be the absolute noun. So I will send fire against the house of Hazael, and it will consume the citadels of Ben Hadad. We should probably translate Beit as palace here, so I will send fire against the palace of Hazael, just because of the parallelism. Since Beit is in parallelism with Armenot, that would just make sense. So let's take a look at the accent pattern. First of all, I want to identify the two major disjunctive accents. And of course, last word, as we would expect, gets the accent siluk. And we remember that oftentimes in prose, very commonly in prose, in fact, the quote-unquote halfway point of a verse is marked by the atnach, which we find below the aleph here. Now, we already know from the translation that these disjunctive accents actually divide the verse up into two sensible syntactic components. And so the Masoretes have provided us with a correct syntactic division of the verse. So V'shilachti has the conjunctive accent mercha, and that is followed by the disjunctive accent tifcha. Bevet follows with the conjunctive accent munach, and then, of course, we get the atnach on Chazael. Now, we've already seen the pattern mercha followed by tifcha in Amos. In Amos 1:1, we see this pattern on Asher Haya Van Nokedim in the first line. The mercha tifcha precedes atnach, just as it does here. We saw it in verse 3 on Bachutzot HaBarzel, which precedes the siluk. And then here again in Amos 1:4, V'shilachti esh. We've learned before that the tifcha comes before atnach or siluk, so it's no surprise to find this accent in that position. Just so you can see how common the pattern of mercha tifcha is, we see it in Amos 1:1, Amos 1:3, 1:4, 1:5, 1:6, 1:7, 1:8. So in short, the only one of the first 10 verses in Amos that does not have the pattern mercha tifcha in it is Amos 1:2. This is therefore a very common accent pattern and one that you will want to get to know, particularly because it always occurs before a major division in a verse. Now, in the second half of the verse, we only have 3 accents. Ve'achla gets, you guessed it, the tifcha. Almenot receives a mercha, and Ben-Hadad receives the siluk. Ben does not get its own accent because it is attached to Hadad by Makef. Now, this is important for students of biblical Hebrew poetry because when you want to count words to identify the meter of a Hebrew verse, there's the question of what actually constitutes a word in Hebrew. We have to remember that the makef is artificial. It's a Tiberian insertion, but on the other hand, it preserves an ancient reading tradition. So when you're analyzing Hebrew poetry, or let's say when you're analyzing the Hebrew of Amos 1:4, would you say that this is a 4/4 rhythm? It's pretty clear that the first half of the verse gets 4 beats. Vishilachti esh bevet Chazael. If each one of those words gets 1 stress, 4 beats. One could also make the case, however, that Vachla Almenot Ben Hadad is 4 beats as well. Nevertheless, that is not how the Masoretes have accentuated the text. All right, let's have a look at the Masoretic manuscripts now. We see that the Cairo Codex reads V'shilach tiesh bevet Chazael, V'achla almenot ben Hadad. Nothing to report there, except the appearance of Raphe marks. Remember, Raphe marks are the marks that distinguish Beged Kefet letters that should be spirantized. In other words, without dagesh, the softer pronunciation. When we go over to the Aleppo Codex, we see that there is a lamed in the margin to the left, but that clearly does not belong to our verse here because there is no cercilis. All we have to do is scroll over to the right, and we see that the cercilis for this note is here, and therefore Amos 1:4 does not receive a Masoretic note in the Aleppo Codex. We get V'shilach tiesh bevet Chazael v'achla almenot ben Hadad. Once again, nothing to report. Notice, however, that there is no sof pasuk here. The sof pasuk is not a mandatory feature in Tiberian codices. We see after Ben Hadad in the Cairo Codex that it is there. It, however, does not appear in Aleppo. We simply have the siluk accent. Likewise, in the Leningrad Codex, there is no Masoretic note here. We get V'shilach tiesh bevet Chazael, V'achla almenot ben Hadad. You can see that the makef is very difficult to make out, but it is there. In this manuscript, we get both the siluk and the sof pasuk there. Okay, let's take a minute to have a look at the Dead Sea Scrolls and to compare the text of Amos found in the Dead Sea Scrolls with the Masoretic text in the Leningrad Codex. All right, so we can see, if you look to the right of your screen there, that the letters Vav, Shin, Lamed in the word V'shilachti are supported by various fragments from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the only other portion from verse 4 that is actually attested is the ot, the plural ending of Armenot, and Ben Hadad. Ben Hadad. So the Dead Sea Scrolls are not in any way at variance with the Masoretic text in Amos 1:4. Now let's check the Targum. Amos 1:4 in Targum Jonathan of the Prophets is actually a super literal translation of a Hebrew forlaga, or the Hebrew base text, which would be identical to the Masoretic text. So we read if you look in the bottom right corner, for those of you who want to try to read some Aramaic, we get Vashalach ishata bevet Chazael utshetse biranyat bar Hadad. One more time, a little slower. Vashalach ishata bevet Chazael utshetse biranyat bar Hadad. So va'ashalach means and I will send fire. This is the Aramaic D stem or pa'el, whichever nomenclature you prefer to use. And it means the same thing as the Hebrew vishilachti. Notice that the Aramaic does not use the vav consecutive. So we have the prefix conjugation, ashalach, with the vav, and the vav does not flip the time of the verb. So, and I will send, ishata is the word for fire. It is a feminine singular determined form. So I will send fire, bevet Chazael, which is exactly what we have in the Hebrew. The Aramaic is identical here. Ut shetze. This is a quadriliteral verb, which means the same thing as ve'achla, and it will destroy. Ut shetze. Again, notice that this is a prefix conjugation, unlike the Hebrew, which is a suffix conjugation because of the vav consecutive. And it will consume biranyat, the citadels of. This is going to be a plural construct, which corresponds to armenot. Biranyat bar Hadad. And this, again, bar is a literal translation of ben, and Hadad is Hadad. So the whole text reads, and I will send fire against the house of Chazael, and it will consume or destroy the citadels of Bar Hadad, the son of Hadad. And you can see from the Targum's English module that Eldon Clem, the translator of this particular text, translates it accordingly. All right, let's have a look at the Greek. And so you can see from the NETS translation, it says, I will send forth a fire on the house of Chazael, and it shall devour the foundations of the son of Hader. Well, this is interesting. So according to the NETS, the Greek text is essentially identical to the Masoretic text here, except in this one particular point, the spelling of Hadad. So let's have a look at the Greek. Kai ex apostello, and I will send forth. Pour es ton oikon, fire against the house of Azael. Kai kataphagetai, and it will consume. Themelia huiu ader. Now the Greek word themelion in the Septuagint, here we are in the LEH Septuagint lexicon. You'll notice that in the note on 2 Kings 16:18, that it means a base. It's elsewhere translated as foundation or wall in Hosea 8:14. So it appears to be an appropriate translation, though it seems that this is not a well-attested term. Now, what do we make of this term ader? Well, let's go over to the BHQ critical apparatus and see what they say there. Now, what do we make of this term ader? Let's do a search in the Septuagint and see if this shows up anywhere else. Well, if we search for Hadad in the ESV, which is based principally on the Hebrew, and we compare with the NETS, we see that in Genesis 25:15, Hadad is rendered a little bit differently. In Genesis 36:35, Hadad shows up as Hadad. The same thing is true in verse 36. However, when we come to 1 Kings 11:14, we see that Hadad is rendered Hader. And this is the case with numerous instances within 1 Kings. Take, for instance, 1 Kings 11:17. And you can see a few more references below. So it'll be curious to see what BHQ makes of this. So we go over to the BHQ critical apparatus, and we see that Ben-Hadad is attested by evidence from the 4th and 5th caves of Qumran, which we've looked at already. And so we also have support from the Latin and the Syriac and the Targums. Again, we've also discussed the Targums. And then huiu ader is only attested in the Greek. In the judgment of the editors of BHQ, there was an error in how it was written. In other words, the two dalets should have been rendered with two deltas in Greek, but because of the similarity of dalet and resh in Hebrew, it was apparently confused in the estimation of the BHQ editorial committee. And the Greek ends up with ader. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, to click the bell below so that you'll be notified when videos like this appear in the future. And please be sure to share this video on social media. I really appreciate the support. See you next time.